Hey guys, it's MPP here with another video of meals that regular people can actually make. No offense to those other cooking channels, but you know, some of us actually like to not have to post our things to Nailed It, right? So, today, or tonight I should say, we're going to make that orecchiette with broccoli, and we are going to add the boneless, skinless chicken thighs to it. I'm just going to fry these up with a little bit of oil and spices, and there's 14 pounds in here, which is just a hair, or 14 ounces, excuse me, which is just a hair under a pound. 16 ounces is a pound. And we're going to do a take a bake Italian loaf, and then I've got those beautiful leeks right there, and those guys are going to get fried up with a little bit of butter and garlic. So without further ado, let's start working on this. Alright folks, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare these leeks, which is going to be really super simple. I'm going to cut them off right about the neck where the dark green starts to grow. Another thing you can do is you can peel these and you can keep kind of the interior where you see the lighter green in there if you want more leek. If you've never had leeks before, these guys have a very light green oniony flavor to them. I actually have a friend who hates the taste of onion, but she does love the taste of leeks. We made some for her and she tried them without knowing what they were going to taste like or without being told what their flavor profile was, and she absolutely thought they were good. So I'm going to get these cut up and I'm going to get them into a bowl of water because leeks grow in sand. So in here, we're actually going to see pieces where there's some dirt or some grit. If you've ever cleaned, say, oysters before, then you know what I'm talking about. Or if you've ever had to shuck corn after it's, you know, outside or anything like that, then there's usually some grit or some dirt like that in there. And so all I'm using today is just a regular chef's knife. Pro tip, when you go to cut things, choke up on the blade of your knife right here on the end. Don't get your fingers down there where they can be cut off, and I actually have long fingernails, so I try to keep those out of the way too. But the reason you do this is because as you're cutting, you can cut straight down. You can put a little bit more force on it, and your blade doesn't slip. I'm sure anybody who's had knives or worked with knives in the kitchen before, you hold it like this, right? And you go to cut something, and your blade slides one way or the other, or you're trying to slice something this way and your blade moves. If you choke up on that blade a little bit, you actually have a lot better control over your knife. Alright, so I have my leeks all chopped up and they're just hanging out in a bowl of water. I was going to show you guys what the grit in them kind of looks like, but these ones were surprisingly clean. Does not mean that you should not clean them, you know, still make sure that they soak, because I want to get into like all these rounds, push those out, and get everything in there clean. Try to get everything out of there. We don't want to eat anything that's in there. And so we're just going to let these guys sit, and any grit that is on them is going to get pulled down from the water, and there's all the excess leeks. And so now that that's done, we're going to get started on that chicken. I'll show you guys what that looks like in a second. Alright guys, so I have my chicken diced up, and you can see I kept two pieces out right here, and the reason I did that was because I wanted to show you guys kind of what they look like and their size. You want to keep, especially when you're cooking protein, raw protein, everything kind of the same size. And the reason you want that is because you want everything to cook evenly. You don't want a piece, you know, this big with a piece half this size, because this piece is going to cook faster and then start to dry out. This one will still be raw in the middle. So since that's done, we're going to get all this into a bowl right here so we can get it over into the pan in just a minute. And I'm going to start heating my pan up on the stove, and let me wash my hand off here real quick because we don't want that meat juice going everywhere. You guys get to see my little sink strainer there. Okay, so we are going to start heating up this lovely beast right here, and so I'm going to set that at a 4, and just like before, we're going to heat up the pan dry. We want the whole pan to have kind of an even heat across it before we put the oil in. And again, I'm using my Chosen Foods avocado oil because it's got a higher smoking point, and because I prefer tasting my food and not oil. Alright guys, so I'm still waiting for that pan to kind of heat up, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to get my oven started. I need to bake that at 425 degrees, and so it takes my oven a few minutes to come up to that temperature. I really need to scrub the back of the oven, apparently. Missed that. Alright, so we're going to start that preheating. And then in this particular pan, we're going to, this is kind of a wok style pan, The directions on that pasta said they want 3¼ cups water brought to a boil with a little bit of oil in it as well. And so we're just going to get all of that going first. And when I am following directions on something like that, and it says like 3¼ cups or 2½ cups or whatever, I always add an extra ¼ cup to allow for my water that is evaporating. So that way when I do put the actual product in there, the water level should be about where it's supposed to be. It isn't going to hurt your noodles. It's not going to hurt your cake. It's not going to hurt anything to have just a little bit extra in there. So we'll get this started and I'll get back to you in a minute. All right, guys, so my pan is starting to get warm. I definitely don't want to touch it. I can feel the heat radiating off of it. So since that is done, I'm now going to add my oil to it, and it's going to be just enough to kind of coat the bottom. I don't want a ton in there. And you can tell how warm the pan itself is by looking at how the oil moves. If it just kind of sits there and doesn't go anywhere, then your pan isn't as warm as it needs, but you can see where it's creating almost strands in it. And if I let it sit for a little bit longer, it'll start to move of its own accord. Can't really see it at the moment, but another good test is always just throw a little bit of seasoning in there. And you can hear that kind of start to sizzle. And this is a salt-free chicken seasoning. And the reason I used it is just because I don't want, I don't need to coat the chicken with anything except a little bit of spice. And a lot of this is going to wind up sticking to the bottom of the pan. But I'm going to throw the chicken in now. Excuse me. And we'll get that in there. Hear that nice sizzle. And so what you're actually hearing when that chicken hits the oil is you're hearing the water in the chicken react with the oil, the heated oil in the pan, which is why you didn't hear that sizzle beforehand, because it was just all oil in there. So we're going to get this cooked up, and it's pretty simple. We're just going to keep stirring it, keep moving it until it's cooked on all sides. It'll go back into another bowl, and when we start to get that pasta done, then we're just going to throw this inside of it. So, and I'll be back with you guys in just a minute. I'm going to get this moved around. All right, guys, as you can see, our water is going, and you can see all the steam rising up, which is why I added that little bit of extra water in there. So I'm just going to follow the directions on this package, which says to add the contents and stir over medium heat for 1 minute. Cover and cook until most of the water has absorbed. Stir spontaneously at convenience during the cooking process, and then season to taste, or add 1 to 2 tablespoons warm water before serving with olive oil for drizzling. So we are going to just pour these guys right in and make sure I get all that seasoning in there. And then I'm just going to give them a stir. Get all of that seasoning mixed around. Make sure these guys aren't sticking together, which is part of the reason why they have you put the oil in the water. It keeps your pasta from becoming kind of a gelatinous mess. And then now that I have that stirred, I am going to reduce my heat here, and I'm going to turn that down to about there, because what I want is I want to take it down to kind of like a simmer. And the reason I want to do that, this smells amazing, by the way. Oh my god, I wish you guys could smell this. That is a really good smell. The reason I want to take it down to a simmer is because I want that water to absorb and evaporate kind of slowly. So I'm going to cover it, and then we will stir at my convenience, which I think is fantastic. And these guys are almost done. You can see most of the chicken has started to turn white. Where it is cooking, it's firming up. Sorry, I'm shooting all this on my phone, and so sometimes trying to look at it not through my phone screen is a little bit difficult. So there we go. You can see us doing that, and I'll be back with you guys in just a minute. All right, guys, so I got my chicken done right here, and a really good way to know when your chicken is done is you don't have to constantly, oh, that's the sound of my oven coming up to temperature. You don't have to constantly take a piece out and cut it open to check it. You can test it by how much it squishes when you push on it. If it's really squishy, then it's still kind of rawish in the middle. If it has more density and doesn't give, then it's more cooked. And the other way you can tell is, if you remember what the sizzle sounded like at the beginning, it was a little loud. And then you can kind of hear now how that sizzle isn't so loud. And so what that means is that it's released a good portion of its water, and that water has cooked out of it. And as that water cooks out of it, the meat itself cooks. So we are going to move this off the heat. It's going to keep cooking for a little bit, and it's going to go back there. And we're going to get ready to do those leeks on the exact same burner that the chicken was done on. I'm just going to switch it to the large setting and turn it up a little bit. All right, and while we wait for that bigger pan to come up to temperature, it's going to be that guy right there. We did the risotto and him the other night, if you watched that. We're going to take this Italian loaf. He's going to go right on the rack into the oven. He's going to go in there for about 12 minutes. We're just going to let him sit. When he comes out, we're just going to slice him and butter him and serve him on the side of this. And this pan is starting to get warm. I can feel the heat in the middle where I had the small burner on. This is two different types of burners. See the white lines in there, small and big. And so what I'm doing is I want to wait for the edges to kind of come up to temp as well, because I want the whole pan to be at the same temperature, or roughly the same temperature, when I throw the leeks in. One, because there's a lot of them. I want them to all cook evenly, just like I did the meat. And two, because, well, actually no, there's really just one reason. All right, heats up on the pan, so in goes a block of salted butter. I'm gonna throw that guy right there, move him around. Want him to coat everything because I have a lot of leeks. And I know, like, those 3 leeks, they didn't look like much, but there's actually quite a bit. If you're doing a big crowd, you really only need like 9 leeks, and they're generally sold in bunches of 3 or 4. And so yeah, you only need about 9 for a big crowd, because they really do make a lot. And so while this guy, grab a different spoon here. While this guy is melting, there. And you can see where the butter is actually starting to brown a little bit. That's because that's how hot I have the pan. And the reason I have the pan turned up that high, I actually have my pan on a 4, is because I'm going to cook those leeks just like I would an onion. Remember, they're kind of a cousin to an onion. And before I get them in there, I want to get a little bit of garlic into this, because I really, really enjoy the buttered garlic leeks. They're my favorite to make. You can make them a bunch of different ways, but that's the way I generally do it. My kids like them that way too. All right, so as you can see, I now have my garlic in here, and I have all the butter has melted. And so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of stirring the garlic, one, because I don't want it to burn to the bottom, even though I have my stove on kind of low. And the reason I have it on low right now is because I don't want this to burn to the bottom. I want it to release its oils and its juices and give up all of its good garlicky flavor without actually burning. And so like that right there is kind of what I'm looking for, where it's starting to brown just a little bit, kind of caramelizing, but not getting black and burning. You do not want the burned garlic. I mean, you could want burned garlic. If you enjoy the taste of burnt food, by all means, do what makes you happy. But I am not one of those people. So I'm going to keep stirring this a little bit and keep it moving so it does not burn and stick to the bottom. And then I'm going to get the leeks tossed in there, and we're going to start getting those guys cooked up. And I guess I should spontaneously stir my pasta as well. Alright, so I now have my leeks in the pan, and I strained these and washed them a little bit more off in a holy bowl, also known as a colander, that guy right there, and just dumped them in here after I kind of shook out the water a little bit. And I don't need to add anything else to this. I don't need to add any extra butter. It definitely has enough. I don't need to add any extra water, and the reason I don't is because the leeks carried a little bit of water with them from the colander, or from the water they were sitting in, and they also have water in them, of course, because they are a leafy green veggie, and so they're going to release that water. And the last thing in the world I want to do is add more water to it, because that will actually slow down the cooking process. All I need to do is just keep these guys moving, kind of spread them out so they can all sit, get warm, come off of there we go, and just let them kind of sizzle a little bit, and then stir them again. And I'll just keep doing that for probably 10 minutes or so. Not even that, actually. It's going to be more like 5 minutes. and then I'll show you what they look like when they're done. Alright, so the majority of my water has cooked off in my pasta, which means I'm now going to add my chicken to it, and I'm going to let all of the fat drippings and everything go in there as well. So that's all just a little bit more flavor. And we're going to stir this around. I'll cover it, and I will keep cooking until all of that water, or the majority of that water, is gone. And in the meantime, my bread has finished, so it is now sitting on the cutting board awaiting slicing and buttering. There we go. Put the lid back on you. Ow. Metal handles on the pot lid makes it hot. There. And you can see where these guys are starting to change color. And that's what I'm looking for. And this is really all that I'm looking for. I like keeping some of that bright green in there. You can see where now it's starting to stick to the bottom a little bit. So I'm going to turn off the heat on these. Remember, if you leave them sitting on the heat, or so long as there's heat in the pan, it's going to continue to cook a little bit. So I'm going to stir these a couple more times even while they cool down just a little. Get that shut off. There we go. And in just a minute, you guys will see what this all looks like together.